Welcome back to another episode of Real Estate. Last month, we looked at the replacement cost of upgrading, and we're going to carry on the same theme by looking at popular buying strategies in the market today. If you missed our last episode, head to the description box for a link to catch it. Today, we're going to look at some of the buying strategies and key concerns in the residential and commercial markets. Today, more couples opt to decouple when considering their second property purchase. Why is this a popular buying tactic for home buyers, and how prevalent is this in the market today? I spoke to CJ of Frontlex Realty to find out more. What is this decoupling that we've heard so much in the market these days?
Decoupling mainly refers to part share. So assuming we're holding on to a property together, right, as joint tenancy, so you'll be having 50%, I'll be having 50%. So it's just an exiting party, so assuming I'm exiting, right, I'll be selling you the 50% shares.
Why have we heard this term more frequently used these days?
It's because of the latest increment on ABSD. So a lot of people who are keen to buy the second property, right, would prefer to use this method so that they can avoid paying the ABSD, which is quite hefty. Yeah, but on the other hand, of course, they also have to be very careful that, you know, they have to plan their reserve funds and all in case of rainy days.
Another thing that we've heard more frequently these days is buying a property in trust. What does this refer to, and why has it become much more popular?
Having to hold an asset is definitely better than holding on to cash. So I think with that, they are planning ahead for the next generation. So this is one very good reasons why they are doing this buying in trust. And also because having an asset, right, is really something that could be outpriced in the future. The con side is that they have to pay in full cash. They will have two factors to consider. Firstly is that they will incur SSD if they choose to sell within the 3 years. And if they choose to sell within the 3 years, the incoming buyers, right, will not be able to get a loan as well.
Has there been certain projects which tend to lean towards these buying in trust or decoupling that are more popular among buyers?
Those that is within $1 million plus minus range. So probably we are looking at the OCR or the RCR market where, you know, they may be planning to buy one studio or two bedders for their next generation. So that is a more popular segment.
While decoupling may seem an attractive avenue for some buyers to afford a second property, it certainly comes with its own set of risks. CJ brought up an alternative avenue, buying properties in trust. Several agents who I've spoken to over the past few months have mentioned that there is an upswell in a number of buyers who take this route. I spoke to Loyal Chin, an agent who deals exclusively in high net worth clients, to find out how trust can be utilized to purchase properties. Loyal, you deal with a very niche group of high net worth buyers who are interested in investing in real estate in Singapore. What does it mean when they purchase a property under trust here?
They usually put their names, individual names, or their companies that they currently own under the trust management, managed by a trustee firm. And this is usually based in Singapore, regulated by MAS.
So why does purchasing a property under trust appeal to this group, and how do you usually go about advising them?
Privacy. Why? Because many of these clients do not wish to be known by the public, let alone internationally in the press. The second benefit, apart from privacy, is legacy. A lot of these ultra high net worth individuals, they like to buy commercial properties under trust because they give them the ability to pass the property to the next generation or any of the descendants. And this benefit will allow them to minimize tax leakages in the future.
Can you elaborate more on how family offices benefit from all this?
Tax incentives. The government is very proactive to support this single family office scheme, both the 13U and 13O tax incentive scheme, whereby international parties can choose to set up their office in Singapore, and eventually they can even apply for Singapore permanent residences. And for those that are more established, they can even go to the global investment scheme, and that was where they can even apply to get Singapore citizenship.
Is there any difference between purchasing a residential property under trust compared to a commercial property under trust?
Fundamentally, there's no major difference between residential and commercial under trust. The one that's commercial is getting more popular under trust because it also allows them to possibly leverage upon setting up the trust structure for commercial properties.
It seems that those who can afford to invest in real estate in Singapore are finding legal ways around the high buyer stamp duties. But there are ramifications behind choices like decoupling and buying a property in trust. I spoke to Jennifer of TSMP Law Corporation to find out the legal perspective behind these popular buying tactics. Thanks for speaking with me, Jennifer. From a legal perspective, how are individuals in Singapore able to own a property that has more than two owners?
One is joint tenancy, the other is tenants in common. So in a joint tenancy, the spouse buys together, they will own it 50-50, and there's a right of survivorship. This means that when the first spouse passes away, the other spouse takes his share wholly without the need of a will, because it transfers by operation of law. Then we have tenants in common. Tenants in common gives more flexibility to the spouses to determine how they want to own the shares in the property and how they use that share. So what I mean is that in tenants in common, the percentage ownership can be 50-50, 75-25, 99-1. Now, the spouses can decide during their lifetime if they want to sell their share to a third party. They don't have to consult the other spouse. Also, when they pass away, they can will their share in that property to a third party. Again, that doesn't need to be their spouse.
We're seeing a lot of couples choose the decoupling route these days. In your opinion, why do you think they are increasingly choosing this option?
With the advent of ABSD, it would no longer be viable to hold properties joint tenancy because they would need to pay for their second property with ABSD. So what I have seen is that there's a trend of owning tenants in common 99-1, so that when it's time to buy the second property, the spouse that owns the 1% or the 0.1 share will sell his share to the 0.99 owner, who with that would only still own one residential property, and that acquisition will not be subject to ABSD. Then for the one who has sold off a 0.1 share, he is now free to buy a new residential property as the first residential property and not be subject to ABSD.
Another thing we're also seeing is that parents are buying residential properties in trust for their minor children. Why do you think this has become more common, and are there pros and cons to this?
They have a family member who owns it as their first residential property that would not be subject to ABSD. So a minor child who is a Singapore citizen would qualify for that position. But do note that when you're holding on trust for your minor child, the minor child actually is in fact the beneficial owner of the property. So everything that derives out of the property, whether rental income or sale proceeds, they are solely to be used for the benefit of the child. The parent has essentially lost control of the property, because if he does use that, then that would be a breach of trust.
For example, in the case of purchasing of a commercial shophouse, we also see that there are shophouses with a residential component. How does this factor in terms of the decisions that they have to make?
Well, if it's a shophouse with a residential component, it's same as buying your residential property. It will also be subject to ABSD. So there's some shophouses in Singapore which are purely commercial. They don't have a residential component. If that's the case, it's not subject to ABSD. You only need to pay BSD.
There's a recurring sentiment that buyers will continue to be active in both the residential and commercial markets this year. As a result, buying tactics like decoupling and buying properties in trust will likely remain popular to those who can afford it. Next month, we're going to cover the up-and-coming co-living market in Singapore, so don't forget to check that out. As always, thank you for watching Real Estate. Real opinions, real statements.